Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. So it's been a year since I've spoken to Adam. This is Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz. He writes for Israel 365. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you should be familiar with him. I've spoken to him before on the channel, and I also cover a lot of his articles because he covers a lot of things that nobody else does, stuff that we're interested in, especially when it comes to things that the Jews would see as a sign of the coming of Messiah. That's really interesting to us. And then he's a really good source for anything that has to do with the red heifer, and that's mostly what we're going to talk about in this video. There are so many misconceptions about the red heifer out there, and there's a lot of sensationalism. I commonly get emails from you guys saying, "Oh, did you know that the red heifer is going to be sacrificed, or that the ceremony is going to take place during Passover or during the Feast of Tabernacles this year? And here's an altar for the sacrifice." They have an altar and just like all this stuff. And I think some of it is well-meaning people that think that they're doing research. Other people, I'm not so sure. I think they're just like relying more on their own speculation, or they may just be outright just coming up with stuff. But the thing about it is that we got to make sure that we do our due diligence and go to authoritative sources. And Adam is in contact with the Temple Institute. I've shown you that before. He has a YouTube channel. I'll put a link for it in the description box below. But he has done interviews with people from the Temple Institute. So Adam is a really good source to go to. So he has a channel, but we're going to be talking about a book that he recently wrote called Return of the Red Heifers, Paving the Road to Redemption. I'll put a link for that in the description box below.
It's very, very fresh off the press. This is my only copy. I just got it like 2 weeks ago. It's that fresh. Yeah.
So this is going to be a good resource if you want to get the real answers about what's going on with the red heifers, what has to happen. And I haven't been able to read the whole book, but I've skimmed through it, and it's much more detailed than anything that we've spoken about before on the channel, or even read from the articles on Israel 365. So Adam, why did you decide to write this book?
I think actually precisely because of what you said. There is so much misinformation, and I hate to say this, but some of it seems to be quite malicious. There's so much misinformation. This is such a hugely important subject that I just had to put at least the truth out there for people to access if they were really looking for the truth. And that's what this book is. So
good. Well, I hope that if you guys are interested, you'll be able to purchase it. It's full of really good information. So
actually, if I can make a few small corrections right off the bat.
Yeah.
The red heifer is not a sacrifice. The red heifer, and also I'm trying to move away from the word sacrifice because it's not a good translation of the biblical term. The biblical term is korban, which comes from the root lekarev, to become close, to come closer. So the service in the temple included, yes, slaughtering an animal and then either burning it completely or usually burning parts of it and partaking of parts of it. It was a Thanksgiving feast. There was also the agricultural grain offerings, the first fruits. The one of the most important offerings, the Passover offering, is entirely eaten. There's nothing of it burned. The blood is thrown on the altar, but it's an offering to thank Hashem for bringing us out of Egypt. So also, and some of the misinformation was laughable. There was a CBS documentary, and they actually wrote a lot of accurate information, including that the ceremony takes place on the Mount of Olives, not on the Temple Mount, and it is burned entirely on a large pyre of wood. And then they showed a photo of a practice altar that was made out of cloth and metal, which the real altar is made out of uncut stones. And it's a practice altar that stands, I believe, in Mitzpah Yericho, which is outside of Jerusalem. It's on the way to the Dead Sea. Mm. And they said and the Jews have even prepared an altar for the red heifer sacrifice. And I was like, where do you begin? And I think actually that was malicious because their whole point was that that we are inciting the Arabs by moving towards a third temple, which because we'll naturally have to tear down the Dome of the Rock, which the Dome of the Rock is not Oxamosk. The Arabs call it Oxamosk. Meanwhile, Oxamosk is the dark
Yeah.
gray dome. And the all of the Muslim structures on the Temple Mount are made from, literally made from, the remains of our temples, but that's not mentioned. So to think that we're inciting the Arabs, and we don't need to build a temple in order to begin the offerings, the sacrifices. We
Well,
just need
some
to
of them,
do
right? There's like some that you can do. That's one thing that you detail in the book is that there's some that you
right. No,
can, but
all of the sacrifices when we came back from Babylonia, the Babylonian exile after 70 years, the temple was destroyed, but we began these sacrifices, the temple service immediately. We're not allowed to, since David consecrated the Temple Mount, the Goren, the threshing floor. We're not allowed to bring offerings anywhere else except for the place of the altar that David consecrated. But we don't need a temple to do that. We just need literally a pile of rocks, which is an altar.
oh,
And
I think I
so
was
we
getting
could,
confused. I was thinking of things that you would need the ashes of the red heifer for and things that you do not need. That I was getting
right.
confused. You're talking
So,
about
yeah,
like the building itself. You don't necessarily
right.
need it. Just okay.
So you touched on something, and it is confusing. There's no question. And to be quite candid, many rabbis have no clue about any of this because they learn practical things like how to figure out if a chicken is kosher, how to, what you can do on Shabbat, things like that. But things having to do with the temple, we haven't needed for 2,000 years, so we haven't learned. There are very few. There are not as many um, Jewish sources about the temple as there are for things that we do on a daily basis. One of the few who speaks about it is Maimonides, Rambam. So we are okay. Try to follow. This is complicated.
Mhm.
We are not allowed. We are required to bring any time-bound public offering, even if we are impure. We need the ashes of the red heifer to purify us. But if we are not pure, we are still required to bring public time-bound sacrifices. So that includes the twice daily offerings. It also includes the Passover offering and a lot of the feast offerings. So as I'm sitting here today, I am required to take part in a public daily, twice daily offering. But because the Israeli government will not allow us, and the only place we are permitted to bring it is on the Temple Mount, we don't. And not on my head because I'm against my will.
Yeah, you can't do
Uh,
anything about it. So,
right.
but
So
if you
that's
could, then you should.
right. Now the red heifer, which as I said is not a sacrifice and is brought on the Mount of Olives, that would purify us to bring the voluntary individual offerings, the sin offerings, the Thanksgiving offerings, all of those. And it's relevant for me, but at the same time, it's also relevant for non-Jews because non-Jews do not take part in the public time-bound offerings. Those are purchased with money, the half shekel, the silver half shekel that all of Israel brings. But let's say a non-Jew wants to bring a sin offering. Or let's say a non-Jew is so happy and he wants to bring a Thanksgiving offering. The way that he would bring it is he would bring it to Jerusalem. He'd shoot me an email and say, Eliyahu, do me a favor. I'm going to be in Jerusalem tomorrow afternoon, and I really want you to take my Thanksgiving offering because I just had a grandson and I'm so happy. Could you take that up to the Cohen for me? Because non-Jews
Just
do
so you
not.
know, you guys, the Kohanim, those are the priests
Right. And
descended from Aaron.
Kohanim do the offering and they bring it in, I go up to the Cohen. It's a relay race.
Hmm.
Okay, so you bring it to me, I bring it to the Cohen, he takes it inside. That's the way it works. Um, so I can't do that if I'm ritually impure. So for me to do that, for me to take my role, my prophetic role that's written in the Bible as a priestly nation, I need and a priestly nation to serve you. I have to be purified by the red heifer. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's why the nations have an interest in getting us the red heifer so that we can serve them.
And it would not only, correct me if I'm wrong, it wouldn't only be for that, but like in Judaism, it would also be Sukkot, right? Because
Yes,
if you guys don't know what Sukkot is, that's the Feast of Tabernacles. That's another name it goes by. But my understanding that a great portion of that has to do with the nations. Like you have
there's
70 bulls, right?
Wow, you're good at this. Yeah, exactly. During the intermediary days, not the first day, which is a holiday, or the last day, which is a holiday, the intermediary days, there's a total of 70 bulls brought, which is representative of the 70 nations, meaning the 70 nations that are mentioned as the offspring of Noah.
Hmm.
All of humanity is represented by the 70 nations. So, yeah, it's 70 bulls that are brought throughout Sukkot, the Feast of the Tabernacles. And I even heard a halachic opinion. Halacha is Jewish law. It's a process of how we determine the law. Um, there are some Jews will say, "Oh, we're nice. We'll let the nations come up to Jerusalem and take part in the sacrifices for the Feast of the Tabernacle." There's also a halachic opinion, that one opinion that says that the nations are required to come up and show their love for the God of Israel, the God of the Bible, by taking part in Sukkot. It's a huge party. That's why you have, it's like, forget about all this Coachella and the silliness that the secular crazy people do, and they do it. It's all impurity and all disgusting, and doesn't praise Hashem. But in Sukkot, it said that even the wise men of Israel used to go out and they would um, juggle torches for the amusement of the people, because it was a huge thing to come and celebrate alongside God. And that's why you weren't in your house. You were in a sukkah, that is the thin-walled, booth, and people would be walking by, "Oh, hi, I remember you from last year." And it was a huge party. And it's missing in the world. It's really missing in the world. So,
So last time we spoke, this was a year ago. I remember that at the time you'd said, if you had asked me just like a week ago, I would have said, no, this is completely impossible that this is going to take place anytime soon because we don't even have a Cohen. But shortly before we did the interview, there was one young man that was identified. And I'd like to know if you know, is he willing to do it or is there anybody else
well,
that could
uh,
potentially do it?
there are actually several. That's actually the easiest part of the whole puzzle, is the Kohanim, because Jewish communities are very scrupulous on maintaining the tradition of the Kohen. I live in a town with 7,000 people. I know almost all of the men who are Kohanim. If I and we there are certain restrictions if you're a Cohen. You're not allowed to marry a divorced woman. You're not allowed to marry a convert. You're not allowed to enter a cemetery. You're not allowed to enter. There are other places like a hospital. You can't go in if they'll actually put up a notice and say Kohanim cannot enter. We're very scrupulous about it. It's not, and there are honors attached to it. They twice a week, 3 times a week, including Shabbat. The Kohanim go up in front of the congregation during the morning prayer, and they bless the congregation, with the hands and the
Mhm.
and
I've
the
seen
and
that
the and the
before.
yeah, it's amazing. And the Levites wash their hands, so we know who the Levites are. And also on their on the gravestones, it's inscribed that he's a Cohen, and they usually also inscribe a picture of the hands. So I know people who, um, either their fathers left the religious life, And yet, when they go back to visit their grandfather's grave, they see, oh, my grandfather was a Cohen, so I must be a Cohen. And it can be determined that they're Kohanim. So we're very scrupulous to know who the Kohanim are. The
Mhm.
problem with the Kohanim for the red heifer was um, we wanted an even higher level of purity. So they wanted a Kohen who was not born in a hospital because hospitals have dead people, had never left Israel because planes carry dead bodies, and you don't know in Israel the graves are very clearly marked. So we wanted someone who had always been scrupulous about not entering a cemetery or not going where dead bodies are. For example, even like the Twin Towers, they didn't get all the bodies out. So if a Kohen steps over where the Twin Towers in New York City used to be, he would become ritually impure from even I would become ritually impure from proximity to a dead body.
Would it be
Um,
that the whole like plaza, like the memorial that they have now, or would it just be the footprints?
absolutely, absolutely. I think it would be the whole plaza. Um, though there would be, I'm sure there have been halachic opinions about that. Also, yeah, so not born in a hospital, never having left Israel, never gone into a cemetery. Um, I think that's it. And they also needed someone who was young enough because it's pretty physically demanding to do shechita, to slaughter a full-grown cow. It's demanding physically and spiritually. I don't know. Have you ever slaughtered an animal?
Just chickens.
Okay.
That
Well,
was hard enough, actually.
right. Most people don't even do chickens, you know? And it's got to be, you got to do it very precisely and very quickly because and a cow is not going to sit there and wait calmly for you. They move around quite a bit.
So it would
Um,
just be a one person job, just one Cohen
well,
that's
there would be several Kohanim involved in it, and they would certainly have a backup, and they would also certainly have Kohanim well versed in it, looking on and giving directions as he was doing it. But there would be one Kohen performing the ceremony, and after he performs the ceremony, he becomes ritually impure. There are all kinds of. It's interesting. We were talking about how the this specific site, there's a very specific site that was used in the time of the temple, and we believe we found the place because it's very specific. It has to be on the same altitude, the same level. There's a
mm,
valley in between the Mount of Olives and the Temple Mount, and so it has to be on the same altitude. You have to be able, at least theoretically, to see from the spot where you're doing the red heifer ceremony into the Holy of Holies if the
mhm.
doors were open.
Yeah.
Of course, there's a problem with in the first temple it was a wall, in the second temple it was a curtain. So the question is, can you see through it? Probably not. Um, but
Now, is this an
the spot
update
is
from the book? Because I was reading through the book, and this is something I tried to figure out before you sent me a copy of your book. Because there's been articles by you, and I think that CBS news story was talking about Uvne Israel having purchased some land. And so when I first saw that, I was
right.
like, oh, okay, so they know where it's at. But
Yeah,
then later, I don't know if it was your article or somebody else's. They were
there's
talking about
there's
the Dominus Flevit Church. So is that
right.
now resolved, like where it should be?
They purchased the land, and the church was actually probably built on or near the site of the red heifer. There's a lot of, for example, there's a water cistern, and you needed a lot of water for the ceremony. Um, there's, and also they believe, it was a religiously significant sacred spot, so it was a good motive for putting the church there.
Mhm.
Um, but another thing people don't realize, and the reason why it didn't happen, is a red heifer is incredibly rare. There've only been 9 red heifers burned since Mount Sinai, since Moses.
Yeah.
And we have the tradition from the Rambam, from Maimonides, that the 10th will be in order to purify all of Israel for serving in the third temple. So they're incredibly rare, 10 of them in the last, what, 5,000 years?
Yeah.
So one red heifer, they did an actual physical experiment. They're about to do another where they burn a cow. And according to all the Jewish sources, and it can purify billions of people because you take a tiniest speck of ash, put it into a big quantity of water, then you take the hyssop, you dip it in, and you go, whoosh, and if one little drop hits you, you're purified.
Yeah, I think that was a
So
question that I had. I think last time I was curious, like how far does that go? It's just one heifer. So, and there's a lot of people, and there's only
billions.
been,
It can purify, absolutely can purify the entire generation, if not more.
yeah.
Probably, definitely more. There are, what, how many Jews in the world? 15 million, something like that, 18 million, maybe
Mhm.
12. I don't, um, we're 0.03% of the world population. So they
So,
know where
yeah, go ahead.
they know where the spot is. They purchased the spot. And
And
it
that's
seems
the
to fit
spot
all
that's
the
owned by Uvne Israel, or
uh
sorry, Uvne
Bo,
Yerushalayim.
Bona Israel. Bona
Oh, Bone
Israel.
Israel. Okay.
There's been a lot of working behind the scenes. Um, there's Rav Tzachi Momo, who's very involved in Bona Israel. And Tzachi, what he's been doing for years and years is purchasing land from Arabs, which in the under the Palestinian Authority, any Arab who sells land to a Jew gets the death penalty. And so a large part of his effort is not only trying to obscure the sale, but also to help the person get out of Israel. Because once they sell the land, they're in big trouble. So he does that. And what he actually does is purchase land that was once owned by Jews.
And this
Usually,
is specifically on the Mount of Olives or other places too.
this is on all, well, he does it also in other places. But once you can do that, they said, okay, what about the site for the red heifer? He's like, okay, let's do it. And they purchased that piece of land, and it was bought years ago. And it's kind of like the good thing about it is no one can really complain. It's not like we're going up to the Temple Mount. And what are you going to say? Jews can't do anything from the Bible anywhere in Jerusalem? It's on the Mount of Olives. Give me a break. No one should get angry. It's on the Mount of Olives on Jewish land. Give me a break.
Do you know what year it was purchased in? Because I have these spreadsheets that I use for my channel to try and keep track of things. And I have a lot of like spreadsheets that are timelines, and I have like this massive timeline of everything that I have been able to find by way of preparing for the third temple. Everything you have to do with the
Oh,
temple.
really?
Yeah. Like
Okay,
like
so now I got a few questions for you. I actually don't know when precisely it was purchased. That might actually, and I've inquired. They kind of are very cagey about it. I think they're trying to hide it because once you know when, then they have a better idea of who sold it,
oh, okay.
and
Yeah.
that would be the big giveaway. So tell me something. I've spoken to a lot of Christians, and how do I put this? There is a concept of the temple of the Antichrist. Which,
Okay.
right, you're laughing, okay? And I'm not going to let you off the hook on this one. I want to hear
Yeah.
this. And I've spoken, and it's funny, but usually it's the Christians who don't know their own theology, who get into, oh, the Jews are bringing the temple of the Antichrist, we have to stop them. They don't understand what the temple of the Antichrist is in Christian eschatology, and they have huge misconception of the concept of the rapture, which is not even deeply embedded in Christian theology at all, according as I understand it. So there's a lot of, I mean, I've been labeled the Antichrist, which,
Of
yeah,
course, of course. Like you have to speculate about everybody. Anybody could potentially
yeah.
be
If you're
the
wondering
Antichrist.
what the Antichrist looks like, I'm not it. Okay, I'm not
Yeah,
nearly important enough.
Adam's a good one.
Thank God. God bless you, man. I love you a lot. Um, but that's what I get from Christians, and I've spent a lot of time and effort actually interviewing knowledgeable Christians, such as Pastor Mark Biltz, Bishop Jerry Bowers, um, about what Christianity really does say about the third Jewish temple. And it's the responses I get on my website, on my YouTube channel, are kind of shocking. There's some Christians who are like, wow, this is amazing. I'm so blessed to be, to see this. And then there are others who are like, you are the Antichrist, you will burn, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I understand that you're a devout Mormon.
Mhm.
What exactly, or at least a committed Mormon?
Oh yeah.
And you're probably the most committed and devout Mormon that I certainly know. Um, there are actually I was going to say there aren't too many Mormons in Israel, but that's not accurate. There's a Mormon university in Israel, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Um, so what does Mormon say about the Jewish Third Temple and the Jewish First and Second Temples?
Oh, well, first of all, one thing nowadays we don't prefer to be called Mormon. That was kind of a nickname. Well, it's always been a nickname, but in our religion, the Lord revealed the official name of the church. So it's preferable just to be like Latter-day Saints or members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Like, it's a long name, but
No, 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 I apologize. You're
no,
absolutely
no,
right.
it's fine. So for us, the temple in Jerusalem is very important, and we don't have a whole lot of details about exactly what's supposed to happen. But the short of it is, when it comes to this whole like Antichrist thing, that seems to come from mostly the evangelical world, from what I can tell. In
It's accurate.
Christianity, the reason why there's so many churches is because everybody interprets the Bible according to their own interpretation. They gain a following, start a church, and so there's not an official Christian anything. In our church, there is because we believe that this is the church restored. We have prophets again and prophets and apostles. And so we believe that there is going to be a temple again and that it's important that we need it. But this whole thing about the Antichrist, there's certain scriptures in our church that we read where we believe that to be what's called the great apostasy. After Christ came, he established a church, but then those that held the priesthood keys, they were martyred, the keys were lost, the church didn't survive very long, and so there was this time of apostasy for about 1800 years. And that's essentially the Antichrist, Satan being the great Antichrist that obscured everything. And so it was necessary for it to be restored through the prophet Joseph Smith starting in 1820. And so other Christians don't have that concept that there was a great apostasy. So they take scriptures that,
Or the return. Or
well,
the return, since they
yeah,
don't hold by the prophecies of Joseph Smith, then they don't hold that the Antichrist has ended or the great apostasy has ended.
yeah, they think that they see what they think is a mysterious figure that's they piece scriptures together from Daniel and other places, and they're like, oh, there's a one person antichrist that has to come and literally be in the third temple and do all this stuff. Whereas we would interpret it just simply as Satan having successfully destroyed the original church and changed everything, and that the church is going to be restored, which
Mm.
we think it has been, but there still needs to be a temple, but not for an antichrist.
So
Our beliefs are kind of interesting, but we believe that there's going to be two Jerusalems. One here where I live in Jackson County, Missouri, in Independence, and then the old Jerusalem in Jerusalem, and that there's going to be a temple there. So it's very important. It's very, very important.
so wow, okay, you're just opening doors for me. So no, I'm serious, dude. This is amazing. Because I mean, when we start talking about third temple, the way Jews look at the Bible is very different than the way other people look at the Bible. We look at it as like we're in covenant with God. He gave us, and as the covenant, he's got his part of the job, we got our part of the job. Our part of the job is remaining faithful to Hashem despite exiles. And also, he said, we see Mount Sinai as a recreation of the world, and God made us partners. And our part in the partnership is to do the commandments. And we don't believe in what they call cafeteria religion. We don't pick and choose. We don't say this is more important, this is less important. God told us to do it, so we do it.
Mhm.
God told us to put these leather boxes and on our head and hands, and we do. God told us not to eat pork, so we don't. God told us to do all these things, and we do them, and they're all equally important. He told us not to murder, we don't. He told us not to steal, we don't. It's all the same, whether we understand it or not. So the red heifer, if we have the possibility of doing it, we have to do it. The third temple, we don't really have a choice. So we have to do it.
Hmm.
We also have we look at prophecy differently. There's actually a tradition, a rabbinic tradition, that um, negative prophecies don't necessarily have to happen. Positive prophecies do. Meaning, if God says he's going to bring us back to Israel, it's going to happen. If God says he's going to bring, a horrible war into the land of Israel, we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
There's wiggle room. There's a bit of negotiation going on.
That's
Um,
dependent on on whether he chooses to essentially bring punishment if there's wickedness,
Right.
right?
And that's very dependent on our merits. If we merit it, we also that's how we view the end of days and Messiah. The Messiah must come by the year 6000 at the very latest. We're in 57, 80 something right now, though there are different opinions about that. Um, because there's a verse that says 1 day is like 1,000 years in God's eyes,
Hmm.
and so the 6 days of creation are 6,000 years, and the seventh day is Shabbat. So when we enter into the year 7,000, or into the year 6,000, and then we're going to be in Shabbat, and that's the Messianic era. But even when it comes to Shabbat, we are allowed to bring in Shabbat early, which in the summertime is very important because it begins at sundown, and eating at 8:30 at night is kind of difficult for the little ones. So
Hmm.
we begin Shabbat a little early, so we can also begin the Messianic era early.
Sorry,
And
if you don't mind me asking, how early can you start Shabbat? Is there like uh
not really clear, and you could also take it out late. Usually in the middle of the afternoon is
okay,
the
but there's not
earliest. A
like a
couple
hard time, like it's but you just
There's a hard time though, which is the latest time at which you can bring Shabbat in,
okay.
which means okay, this is the minute. There's two sundowns. There's when the sun goes below the horizon, which is called Shkia, and then there's what's called Tzet Kochavim, is when three stars come out, which is later. Okay, and
Hmm.
there's time in between, which is kind of problematic, and it's in doubt, is what we call a suffix. So we like to be um, doubly sure. So as soon as the sun goes down, we start keeping Shabbat, but we don't take Shabbat out until after the stars come out. So Shabbat is actually 25 hours long.
Hmm.
Um, so, but that applies, you can apply that to the end of days and the Mashiach, where we can bring in Shabbat early. And how do we do that? We do that through the merit of our mitzvot, performing commandments through our righteous deeds. And if we if we deserve it, if we're deserving, God will say, you know what? Time to bring the good days, and He'll bring the Messiah. And of course, part of that is building the temple. God's going to look down. He's like, there's a temple down there, and the temple is the place where I dwell, and I really want to hang out with my people. I want to go down, hang out, and have a nice meat meal. Let's have a barbecue. And he'll
Hmm.
come down, and we'll have the temple and the Messianic era, God willing.
But
So
it would be the Messiah himself though that would in some way bring
I
the
think,
temple or make it
well,
possible.
Jews have a two-stage process in Messiah. There's Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David, the
Yeah.
Messiah from the house of Yosef and the Messiah from the house of David. The Messiah from the house of Joseph is is not a person. And there are a lot of different opinions, but this is the main opinion, and in the one I ascribe to, and it's if anyone asks, it's from the students of the Gaon of Vilna, the Vilna Gaon, who was one of the first to speak directly to the issue of Mashiach. It's a process that includes the returning of the exiles, the blossoming of the deserts, the or the ingathering of the exiles, um, and the resettling of the land, and yeah, and that would be and the wars to conquer the land, which is it's similar to what we went through when we came out of Egypt. There was a period in time in which we had to actually acquire the land
Yeah.
through our deeds. Um, and whereas if God wanted, he could have just given it to us. but there's this act of acquisition that we had to do. And that's Mashiach ben Yosef, Messiah from the house of Joseph. Because Joseph was a very practical person. Uh, and then there's Mashiach ben David, from the house of David. And according to Maimonides, that includes fighting the war against Amalek, fighting the wars to conquer the uh, the land, getting rid of all of the inhabitants of the land who shouldn't be here. That's not all of the nations. It's just specifically the inhabitants who shouldn't be here, who were mentioned in the Bible. And there's a question about whether they're still here. Okay. But it also involves at least beginning the temple service, perhaps even building the temple and full on, and establishing that will be done through the reestablishment of the Davidic dynasty. And that is most probably a specific individual who will show up.
Yeah.
So,
When it comes to preparing for the red heifer, but also other things have to do with the temple, you're talking about looking for like those sources that would tell you how to do it that really aren't talked about today. Like you have the more practical things of today,
right.
but you have to go hunting for the details of how to do stuff. Where do you find that? Is it in the
Well,
Talmud? Are there like lots of different sources that are
there are
looked at?
lots of different sources. There are hints. We're also dealing with problems we've never encountered before and possible solutions we've never encountered before. For example, um, one of the requirements is that it be unblemished. And whenever a baby cow is born, they put in an ear number, an ear tag
Mhm.
that puts a hole in the ear. It's a blemish. It disqualifies the heifer. Okay. So it just so happened that the five heifers that they brought to Israel were born during the coronavirus, and the person whose job it was to put in the ear tags was in quarantine when these five heifers were born. So they never got the ear tags.
Wow.
So yeah, really,
That,
all of
doubt that's I doubt that's just a coincidence.
I also doubt that. Don't want to say that all of the coronavirus was so that these cows could come to Israel, but it might be part of the reason why things worked out the way they did.
I'm sure that God a lot of times will probably hit multiple birds with one stone. So,
Right. Yeah. Fair. Beautiful. 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 I love that. Yeah. So, but then the problem was to bring them to Israel, they need to have some kind of identification. And a red heifer is not permitted to carry anything.
mm,
So much so that if you lean on it, it disqualifies it. And so you're not allowed to put a collar on it. You're not allowed to, and there was a thing maybe you could put down in its stomach. Anyone who does is a rancher. They put when they're like a year old, you put there's a like it looks like a capsule made out of plastic with a magnet, a very strong magnet inside of it, and you put them put it in their stomach, and it stays in their stomach for their entire life. And that's in case they eat like bolts or screws or nails or anything. They get attached to the magnet, and they, otherwise it could kill them. Um, so they investigated, could you put something like that inside these red heifers? And the answer is no, because they'll be carrying it. So they figured out a place on the heifer's body that you could put an RFID chip, which is tiny, and it wouldn't leave a scar. So that was one of the solutions. And when they were talking about the place for the ceremony, there's a problem because the Mount of Olives is a huge cemetery. Now, there happens to be a pathway going to the site of the red heifer that there's been a Jewish tradition for hundreds of years that Kohanim can walk on that pathway because it's totally, they've never buried any bodies there. So it's clear.
mhm.
But even so, there's it's kind of involved. So they said, well, maybe we can use a helicopter. Just bring it in, drop them down, and solves
I
the
guess if
problem.
you
And they're
want to be really
investigating.
safe about it, yeah.
Yeah, and they're also asking, can you use if these are not if these animals are not kosher to be used, can you use genetic engineering to create a perfectly red heifer? That's also a question, obviously a question that was not asked by the rabbis because it wasn't a possibility up until recently. So there are a lot of questions and a lot of answers, and possible solutions that are new and unique. And also, like for example, another problem is whenever they did the red heifer, they always had the ashes of the previous heifer, which made it very simple because they could just purify anyone and everything involved in it.
Hmm.
And we don't have that right now.
Yeah.
The only time it was done without was when the first red heifer was done in the time of Moses. So we have to find a way how to do it without the ashes of the previous red heifer. Though there is a possibility that there was a stash of ashes of the red heifer put into the how do you say it? The Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant, we believe, is hidden precisely underneath where it always stood. There was an alcove prepared by King Solomon when he built the first temple, directly underneath the Holy of Holies. So it's an alcove, it's a tunnel going down, and there's an alcove in the Ark of the Covenant isn't it? And no one's ever explored under the Temple Mount, even though it's full of tunnels.
Like
But
no one at all, because I thought that there had been some Arab activity under
absolutely,
there.
Arab no,
Oh,
Arab no. The
okay.
Arabs do not want to go there.
Okay.
Um, they don't, which is kind of strange. I mean, they say it's theirs, but they're not curious. They won't let archaeologists go up there, and they actually go out of their way to destroy any remains. And as I said,
Yeah.
the Muslim structures are made out of our temples, which I cannot tell you how much that pains me. But if we could get there, we might be able to find a stash of the ashes of the red heifer, which would make things much more simple. So there's a lot of questions, and the Temple Institute has set up a committee, a rabbinic court headed by Rav Azaria Ariel, to ask and answer these questions. And they're not simple. They're not simple at all.
Are there still lots of questions, or have they been able to kind of narrow it down to where they're just working on a few?
Uh, there are questions that are just. I think there are a lot of questions that may or may not be relevant depending on how things work out.
Yeah.
So, for example, genetic engineering, if we can find a kosher red heifer, that's not a question. The problem is two non-red hairs disqualify the heifer.
Hmm.
And one of the main reasons it hasn't happened until now is because it's very clear and obvious to anyone who goes sees the cows that they're not entirely red. So as the cows get older, they get more non-red hairs. So they don't want to say they're not kosher, they're not qualified, because that for that to say that you have to actually inspect them. And when it became clear that there was a problem, they chose not to inspect them. So they can't say they're not kosher, they can say they're not certified.
Yeah. Because that was the last article that you wrote about them, right?
Right.
Where he was,
That was directly from Rabbi Ariel. I was very careful about that. I
yeah.
was very careful about
Yeah. Because I think we had talked about this last time how I figured, okay, here's some candidates. I would think that you would want to move as quickly as possible to get this done before something happens. But at the same time, just like what you're talking about, there's like a lot of effort to make sure that it's done right at the highest level of purity.
that's exactly the point. It's once every it's been once every 500 years that we have one. If you don't do it right, don't do it at all. It's got to be absolutely perfect so that when the priests and when the people go up to the temple, they can say, "I am absolutely 100% sure that I am pure to do what I'm doing now." And unless they do it absolutely correctly, you can't say that. So they're working very hard to make sure everything is perfect.
So what's your overall sense of how things are going to go? I know it's like it's impossible to predict, but how do you feel about it? And what's the overall opinion, would you say, among the people that you talk to at the Temple Institute? Like, do they feel like it still could happen soon, or is it just like there's like still so much to figure out?
Soon, I don't think so. Unless we suddenly find a red heifer, unless suddenly all of the non-red hairs fall out of one of the cows, it's not going to happen anytime soon. Um, but at the same time, we do not have the right or the privilege or the ability to say it's not going to happen. We can't do that. God told us to do it. We can't walk away from that. So we are still working on every aspect of the temple. And as I said, if the Israeli government turns around and says, you can do, for example, the Passover offering, you can do it this year. We there are actually several altars that are on wooden frames that are just stones that have been prepared for this.
Hmm.
Um, there's two concepts in halacha, lechatchila and b'diavad. Lechatchila is the ideal. Okay. Ideally, you have this huge altar that's plastered over that has four or five, depending on the interpretation, large pyres of wood on top. It has the ramp. It's built a certain way. That's the ideal. And then you have less than ideal. Like, for example, when the Maccabees reconquered the temple and they sanctified it, they didn't have a gold menorah. So they just took some metal rods, jammed them into the ground on the Temple Mount, and put oil lamps on top of it. Not the ideal, but according to the rabbinic sources, it's kosher enough. So we have altars that are kosher enough, minimal altars, if you may. If we got the word to do the temple service, if like right now the prime minister's office said go for it, it would literally take us three hours, maybe four, or maybe even less, to start doing the temple sacrifices, the temple service. We would do it, run up there with this pile of rocks, arrange them. We have kosher kohanim ready to do it. We have all the utensils necessary. They would do it. We'd pick up the rocks, wash it off with a hose, go back. No one would ever know we had been there. We could do it within 3 hours.
Yeah.
Everything is ready. Everything is ready.
Yeah, that's
The
something that I've specifically kind of I have a special thing for it on my spreadsheet, my timeline, how I think I have like four different articles that point to like different iterations or additional altars like what you're talking about. There's like probably at least like four of them, would you say?
yeah, absolutely. There's even a big one. They made out of in Israel. It's called itung. It's like a foamed concrete. It's bigger than a cinder block, and it's foamed concrete. It's excellent insulation, but incredibly water absorbent. But they're very light. So they checked it out, and it is rock. It's like concrete is a rock. Concrete is like a rock that was once liquid and now isn't, and this is the same thing. And they have it on a big frame. You take it up, rearrange them, and you've got actually a big one that Kohanim can walk around on. And that's been sanctified for use. There's also a one man who has been educating priests, Rav Baruch Kahana, and he has refused the title of high priest of Kohen Gadol, but he is prepared to serve in that function if we need.
Hmm.
So there's
Okay.
that.
I
Um,
know him just through like seeing pictures of him and all the articles about
yeah.
him.
Do you know who he is?
Uh, no, other than just his name and that he's kind of
He's
like
the
filling that
nephew. There
role.
was a Rav named Baruch Kahana. Baruch, not Baruch Kahana, Meir Kahana. And Meir Kahana started. He was first of all he was a huge Torah scholar, and he started a party called Kach. It was considered to be an ultra right wing party, though in hindsight he was right about everything. Um, he was like, if you give the Palestinians a state, you're going to have to kill them. and he was right. Um, we would have saved ourselves a lot of heartache if we had listened to him. But the Israeli government actually outlawed his party, and he was assassinated by a Palestinian at a speech in New York. And the Baruch Kahana, the one who God willing will serve as the high priest if we need, um, he's his nephew.
Oh,
And what's
wow.
amazing is Rav Baruch is probably the most gentle, soft-spoken man I've ever met in my life. He's like, I I've interviewed him a bunch of times and spoken to him a bunch of times. And I introduced my boss, Rabbi Tuli Weiss, to him, and they started speaking in English. And I'm like, I didn't know you spoke English. And he's like, well, you never asked. Okay. Just so soft spoken. He's really a super gentle person, um, totally apolitical, totally into serving God. He's an amazing man.
I
I
feel
love
like
him
you can
dearly.
see that just by looking at pictures of him because he seems
Yeah,
like he has a certain dignity to him.
yeah,
There's a
absolutely,
reverence to him.
absolutely.
I
And
like him just from the pictures.
he also at a lot of the reenactments he will serve, and at a lot of the reenactments he'll make sure that someone else serves as the high priest in order to make sure that there's someone who can do it, who can take his place, who can serve in the place. He's also very humble and modest, so that's yeah, he's definitely there. But we have all the utensils. Everything is ready if we need to go. It's just Israeli government.
Going back to him, what was he chosen by the Sanhedrin? And is there a Sanhedrin right now? Because I feel like I read an
Oh.
article one time saying that it kind of I think it dissolved for a little bit, right? I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, Jared, first of all, I'm so impressed at how you follow this stuff and you get it all right. I haven't seen you get anything wrong yet, which is very heartwarming to me because we need we need allies. It's got to be a house of prayer for all nations. It can't be just us. It's not going to be a new kind of synagogue. It's going to be a house of prayer for all nations, which the problem right now is that the Temple Mount is a house of prayer for only one nation, and that's a problem. So, I'm sorry, what was the question? You
Just
said,
the Sanhedrin.
oh,
Are they
right.
they're the ones
So,
that chose him, and are they still?
so my first big stories that I wrote 9 years ago were about the Sanhedrin, and I was very supportive of the Sanhedrin. The reason being that it's forbidden for me to use a court of law that is not a Sanhedrin or a Beit Din or a biblical Torah court. It's like eating pork. It's like going to a restaurant, having kosher food and non-kosher food, and choosing the non-kosher food. If I'm in America, I've got no choice, so I get a rabbinic court to tell me yes, you can go to the non-rabbinic court. So I was very enthusiastic to write about the Sanhedrin. They've been trying to get it together for about a dozen years, and there are a couple problems. One of the problems is religious Jews do not want to do these things. They do not want to fully return to Israel. It's a pain. They're very comfortable keeping a lower level of Torah. They're very comfortable with Shabbos, keeping kosher, family purity, and not too many other things. But when it comes to the mitzvahs that are dependent on the land or surrounding the temple, or things like the Sanhedrin, or things like fixing the calendar, they'd rather not relate to it because it's a real bother and it means getting out of your routine and going into unfamiliar, more involved and difficult territory. And they don't want to do that. So they don't want to. And also, there's a lot of, oh, who do they think they are? And I'm like, who cares?
Are
It's a
these the ones
Sunday.
that like protest against the state of Israel? The ones that will join with the?
No, not even, but also, not
Okay.
even, but also. Um, but so when I started connecting with the Sanhedrin, I was very enthusiastic. I'm like, if you can't get, the highest level of kosher food, so you've got kosher food, go for it. So this may not be, the Sanhedrin of Moses and the 70 elders, but it's better than going to some, you know, Arab judge in the high court in Jerusalem or some anti-religious judge in Jerusalem.
Mhm.
Or so I prefer these rabbis. And there was a, they unfortunately there was some infighting, there were some issues, and it kind of dissolved, which was very disappointing for me. They're still there. They've made a renewed effort to bring it together. I was very impressed that the nations, the non-Jews, were much more enthusiastic and supportive than the Jews. I was writing articles about the Sanhedrin, um, chastising the United Nations, and the United Nations actually responding because they took it seriously. The Sanhedrin of Israel saying you can't divide the land, and the United Nations chose to respond to it a couple times, which was very interesting. And yes, they said, if we have a temple right now, and we have a sudden need, Baruch Kahana is the person who will serve in the function of the high priest of the Kohen Gadol. So yes, they did choose him, and he agreed. Not as a permanent, you are the Kohen Gadol, but as a, if the need arises, you will be the person who fulfills that function. So yeah, they chose him.
If that's what actually happens, that's a pretty incredible honor for him to be the first one in all this time.
I don't think he sees it as an honor.
Well,
He's just
I'm
like,
sure he's a very humble person, but still, I think that you can have a healthy sense of pride in just realizing that you're doing something special. Um,
I think he's so, I mean, this man, it's like, if you take out, he's just so full of, I'm serving God, and if you take that out, there's nothing left. There's no Baruch Kahana. He's all about serving God. He's an amazing man. He's a real inspiration.
has he ever worn the actual like
Yeah.
the not just like I don't know if they just have practice
Um,
ones for reenactments,
the,
but like the actual one with the breastplate and everything?
it's actually, something I should look into this. They do have actual priestly garments.
Mhm.
There are certain elements that I don't think they have, and if they do, he has never worn, that are specific to the high priest. The tzitz, the gold headpiece that says Kodesh Lashem. There's of course, the Choshen Mishpat, the breastplate. There are certain things that are specific to the Kohen Gadol, and also, I hate to say that I don't know this, but there's a problem wearing the priestly garments. The girdle, the belt, is a mixture of wool and linen, which is forbidden in the Torah. It's what we call shatnez, and it's forbidden to wear a mixture of wool and linen. But because the Torah specifically describes the priestly garments, and specifically describes the girdle as being wool and linen mixed together, so priests wear that garment. The question is, and I hate to say that I don't know this, but there's so much to know, so much to learn. Um, the question is, if we're just practicing, can they wear this forbidden garment? That's a good question. I don't know. Sorry.
That's fine. Well,
I'm not a scholar. I'm a reporter. I know who the scholars are.
well, I've really appreciated in this time that I've done my channel all the articles that you've written and being able to talk to you because, like I said, a lot of the stuff that you write you can't find anywhere else. And you've covered a lot of really incredible things. Like there was
Um,
that one time that you had come across the video of, I think it was during Sukkot. There were prayers being done on the Mount of Olives, and across the way on the Temple Mount, there was like a mist that came up.
that was Josh Wander. I want to be Josh Wander. Okay,
Oh,
Josh
is he
Wander.
the one that wrote the article
Yeah.
or took the
No,
video?
no, no. Josh Wander. He's an amazing guy. I've known the guy for years. I'm so happy to say that I think he considers me a friend. I certainly consider him a friend. He lives on the Mount of Olives. Like, I take a bus to his apartment, and first of all, it's a gorgeous apartment. From his balcony, you're looking down at the Temple Mount. Okay, and you can't take a walk around his apartment. because it's surrounded by really nasty, horrible, vicious Arabs. It's just it's East Jerusalem, and they're not good people. And the apartment building has heavy security, but he looks down at the Temple Mount. So a lot of these things I write about, he actually goes to and does. I live in the Golan, so until I hear about it, it's too late. But he he was the one who saw that mist.
I'm so
Yeah,
glad he got video of it. It's incredible.
he's got an amazing video, and every time I talk to him, I hear more stories that there's just too many. It's drinking from a fire hose. There's just too many stories for me to write. I'm waiting to do a video with him before Passover. He went out and bought a sheep, and it was totally kosher for the Passover offering, and he kept it on his balcony in his apartment, and he had everything he needed to do the Passover offering. Because if word came out, even during Passover, he would just grab his sheep, grab his neighbor who's a Cohen and who's totally ready, and who had his Kohanic clothes in the closet, and who had a knife, and they would run to the Temple Mount and do the Passover offering. But it didn't happen. But that's the kind of guy he is. He also has silver trumpets that he had specially made for announcing temple events, announcing the Messiah, announcing all these amazing things. He's got a carrying case. It's like
That's
he's
awesome.
serious. Yeah, he's an amazing dude. He's really, God bless him. It's just every time okay, I've got a job. I write these stories. But there are people, people who say, "Oh, I'm so busy taking care of my family, cleaning my house," and uh, there are people. It's like everyone who's trying to bring the third temple and who's working towards Geula, they're working triple overtime. I have this. I think when the Messiah finally comes, there's going to be an auditorium where all the people who helped bring him are going to have a party, and it's going to be a huge auditorium with like 100 people in it, because it's not that much work. I mean, look at you. You're bringing the word to thousands of people who are so disconnected from what's actually happening, and they want to hear about it. And you're
Yeah.
one guy, and that's the way it is. It's just, God expects us to really step outside of ourselves, and He also gives us the strength to do it.
Yeah. I
So,
guess you you have to have eyes to see and ears to hear what's
absolutely,
going on. And I think about not only you
absolutely,
but other
absolutely.
things that I've seen. It feels like things have really come to life as far as like when I look at Jews, it feels like there's a lot that are getting really excited over a lot of things, and I think that they're justified. I look at things like the appearance of foxes on the Temple Mount, but not just that they're showing up, but the times, the days that they're showing up. I'm tracking three times. One was in the lead up to Tisha B'Av. I can't remember the year. I don't know if it was 2023, but it was something like that. And then you had another one. It was like the
I think it
next
was
year in
before.
January. But then the third one that I'm tracking, they actually showed up on Tisha B'Av. It's almost like an escalation of like the sign. Like first it's like, oh, it's before Tisha B'Av, but then the last one it's like actually on Tisha B'Av that they were cited. And if that's not a sign, I don't know what is.
There are, actually, it's so good I'm talking to you. Uh, Let me see. There 2023 that happened. It was on Tisha B'Av. You're right. Wow, dude, you're awesome. You are really good. January 2023, July 2023, which was Tisha B'Av, um, uh, and also 2019.
Yeah, so
I think
that
that
one
was
would have been before I started my channel, but I saw an article for it. But yeah,
that was the first time. That was the first time was 2019. And the whole point of that, there's actually a story in the Talmud about it, because foxes only go to places that are desolate,
yeah,
like totally desolate. And there's a story in the Talmud about how some sages went up to the Temple Mount, and one of them was Rabbi Akiva, and they saw foxes, and they were all like, "Oh, it's desolate, and there's a prophecy that wild animals will be running where the temple is because it's desolate." And they all cried. And Rabbi Akiva laughed. And they said, "Why are you laughing?" They said why they were crying. And he said, "Well, because there's also a prophecy that it will be rebuilt. So if this prophecy came true, that prophecy will came true."
Hmm.
So that's why the foxes were significant to us. But as you said, I'm actually, I mentioned to you before we started taping that my next book, which I just got the green light for, I mean, I'm still marketing this book, and it's a big. The marketing is where the rubber hits the road. It's really hard to market books,
Yeah.
but even before the dust settles, I'm already working on a new book called Signposts, which are all these things that you're talking about, the signposts that are showing us that Geula is on the way. I mean, of course, the first most prominent, unbelievable, powerful sign that that God is ready to start showing his wonders in the world was the return of the exiles and the creation of the state of Israel.
Yeah.
And there are people who are, this whole thing of going back to 1960s occupation. It's the occupation. What's they have another term, uh, not empirical, but that we're colonial.
Oh yeah.
Um, and that's a denial that we're returning to our land. It's a denial of prophecy. What are they really denying? They're denying that God kept his word to the Jewish people. Why? Because if God doesn't do anything in this world, then it's okay for you to do horrible things. It's okay to kill babies. It's okay to God forbid, for a man to wear a dress. It's that all that stuff is perfectly fine because where's God? He's not around. But as soon as you start seeing, look at this, God is keeping his promise, then you get a lot of people who are like, oh my, that's not okay. We got to do something about that. You also have a
Yeah.
lot of people who are like, oh my, God is keeping his promise to the Jewish people. We got to get on board.
Yeah. And hence, I think a lot of the excitement that's going on right now, because it just seems like
Sure.
so much is going on. Do you think that, and sorry, I don't mean to like keep you for too long, but
No,
I
no,
just,
I'm cool. I had a cup of coffee. I'm set.
okay, good. I was,
Sorry, I would offer you one, but the one thing I do know about the Church of the Latter-day Saints is you and you're going to come up and we'll have some amazing juice, but that's about it.
yeah, exactly. Um, I was just thinking just now, because I have this on another spreadsheet, but this year is going to be Israel's 77th birthday anniversary. Do you think that there's
Yeah,
anything special about that? I don't know like what a
I
Jewish
think
perspective would be on that, but
I'll have to look into what we call gematria, which is the numerologies. What I will say, oh gosh, as we're sitting here today, it's becoming nightfall. So until from last evening, when the sun set yesterday until about now, was what we call Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, where we remember all the fallen soldiers and also the victims of terror. Um, so, and as that ends, I mean, this is how we see it. That ends, and then we can celebrate our Independence Day. And it was a very powerful Memorial Day because we're sitting there doing a memorial, and usually you do the memorial, and it's like, um, okay, I'm remembering, soldiers that were killed in '67 war, which is already, what is it, 65 years ago, or 60 or 55 years ago. I'm remembering soldiers who fell in '73, soldiers who fell in '48 and '47. And it's a little bit removed, not a lot, because it's a very small country and we all know each other. And it's a very small country with a very painful history of being attacked, um, and our neighbors who want to wipe us off the planet, and sometimes even our own people who live inside our country trying to murder all of us. Um, but yesterday we were remembering people who have been killed in the last year and a half,
mhm.
and that's a very different thing. So it's a very powerful Independence Day. Um, I remember, oh gosh, I went into the office I think a week ago when it was the Holocaust Memorial Day, and we have a siren, and it's like 100% of the people. well, 99.9% of the Israelis stop and stand. If they're driving on the highway, they pull over to the side of the road and get out of their car and stand. No one drives when the sirens are going. There's two sirens on Holocaust Memorial Day. There's two sirens on Memorial Day, one in the morning, or actually one in the evening, and then one in the morning. Um, and when I went into work, the siren went off for Holocaust Remembrance Day, and we all stood. And one guy went running for the bomb shelter because for the past year and a half, a siren has meant a rocket attack.
Hmm.
This morning, I went shopping with my wife, and we're getting ready to park the car in the parking lot, and the siren goes off, and my wife is like, "Oh no, what do we do?" And I'm like, "Stop and stand." She thought it was a rocket attack. So this year, Memorial Day and Independence Day are really powerful and personal. And I don't know anyone who has not been personally touched by October 7th and the war over the last year and a half. We've all been personally touched. It is a small country. I mean, it's smaller than New Jersey. You know, you have Israel, the IDF fighting a seven front war. We don't have a big army. You
Yeah.
know, you're talking about average guys.
Well, I've
Um,
kind of looked at it as Israel's fourth existential war because you had the War of Independence, you had um, the Six Day War, you had the Yom Kippur War, and I don't know, that's just my own analysis. Those were potentially existential wars, but now
Oh, they
you
were
have this
absolutely
one.
existential. I mean, 67, it was just mamish, the hand of God going, it won't have to last too long on this one. Okay, he took care of it. The 73 war was really catastrophic and almost, I mean, there were like literally from Syria, they had 1,000 tanks poised to come into Israel against 35 Israeli tanks, and somehow we won that battle.
Yeah. And then almost exactly 50 years, like to the day from the Yom Kippur War, you have this one that there's like all these numbers, all the timing, all these like coincidental things. It's not coincidence, and
No.
something is going on. And I don't know how this war ends up. It's like still going on, but it just makes
Sure
you
you
really
do.
well. Yeah,
Sure you do. You've read the Bible. Come on,
I
dude.
do.
We know how it's going to end up. The amazing thing about reporting from prophecy is you know what's going to happen. You just don't know what it's going to look like when it happens, and you might not even understand it or see
Yeah.
it when it happens. But you know, and then afterwards you'll see it happens, and you're like, "Oh, yeah." Now that you mention it, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. So we know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
Um,
I tend to think that what's happening right now, if I were to guess, I feel like this is part of that final uh war, like the actual war. I guess it depends on how things go. I don't know if this one would come to an end and then there would later be a final war, but I just it's so unusual what's going on right now. And
remember I said negative prophecies don't necessarily have to happen.
yeah.
There was a very prominent rabbi, um, guy with thousands of followers, who said that because of our merits, because the Jewish people, God bless them, 2,000 years of faithfulness, um, in the darkness of exile, and we stayed faithful. And when God said return, a lot of us did. Um, and he said, because of our merits, um, the war of Gog and Magog will not be fought inside Israel. It'll be fought outside of Israel. And that's what we are seeing. I mean, this war could very easily, I mean, it did begin inside Israel, in the most horrific manner. But I mean, there have been a lot of miracles in this war. You know, you just
Yeah.
look at an Arab and say, "Beeper." There have been a lot of miracles, you know, really, like, thank God. Even on October 7th, as horrible as it was, there were amazing stories of courage and bravery. The hostages showed a stunning level of faith and belief. They had a seder. They managed to actually have a seder in captivity. Several of them kept Shabbat, in captivity. So people who say, "Well, I don't know about the Shabbat thing." These people were in captivity by Hamas, and they kept Shabbat.
It's
You
incredible. How
know,
do they have the Seder? In case you guys don't know what the Seder is, if you're new to my channel or you don't know, it's what you think of as the Passover meal, the Passover
they
Seder.
they managed to get some grape juice. They might not have had matzah, but and a lot of, especially Sephardi Jews, know it entirely orally. Uh, they can recite it by memory. But the stories, there were some of them they managed to get candles and light candles in captivity to keep Shabbat. There was one girl, they would force her to. They were slaves. There were some who were the men were generally kept chained up, literally nonstop, um, for hundreds of days, chained up in darkness. But the girls were not, mostly, and some of them were treated as slaves in horrible manners. But one, they came to her and they had her cooking and cleaning. And on Friday afternoon, she looked at them and said, "No, no, this is my Shabbat. I am not cooking and cleaning for you until tomorrow night." And she kept Shabbat in captivity. That takes a huge amount of faith and courage.
Yeah.
And there were stories about that. So there's a lot of darkness, and like they say, a little bit of light can dispel a huge amount of darkness. And we're seeing that. I mean, it's like you said, you need the eyes to see it. We're seeing Hashem's hand acting. I mean, also for the October 7th, how did we miss it? How did they just come across the border? Tragically, that was also Hashem. The Holocaust was God. It's difficult to deal with, but it was God acting in the world. He was not absent. He was he had a plan that was painful for us. October 7th was a plan that was painful for us. It was absolutely God acting. And since October 7th, we've seen God acting in the world. And we also know that God will take part in Gog and Magog. It's not going to be passive. And it's a war to see who's the strongest. No, it's a war. It's a God war. And we're going to see God acting. And that's, I think, what we've seen since October 7th
Yeah.
is God is fighting in this war. So, I mean, so we do know how it's going to work out.
Yeah.
Israel is once again against seven nations, against Iran. I mean, Iran shot 500 ballistic missiles at us, and
That's the thing. There's like so many like markers or things that go along
yeah,
with this. That's another thing that I had covered on my channel is that because the defense minister pointed out how it was a seven front war, and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And the
yeah,
fact that it happened on October 7th, I know it's on our calendar, but still, it's something that I can recognize as like, oh, it happened on the 7th. And then for me specifically, being a member of the church, we there was 7 days later there was this annular solar eclipse, not a total, but an annular solar eclipse. In the path of annularity, it passed through Utah, and that's where the headquarters of my church is. And
oh,
I got the file from NASA that shows the path, and it goes through Utah, but it misses all the temples except for one. Utah is full of temples, full. And
really?
so for a path of annularity to go through the state and miss all of them except for one, it had to take a very specific path, and I just felt like there was something to that. Um,
Kind of dodged around a bit.
it,
Yeah.
it's odd how it worked out. And then, like I said before, 50 years after the Yom Kippur War,
Hmm.
minus like 1 day, like
Why is
whenever I think
50?
of 50, I think of like Jubilee years, and I don't
Yes.
know, but
Yes. I mean, a Six-Day War was also a jubilee. So that's another thing. We have to declare the jubilee, but in order to do that, we need a Sanhedrin.
yeah,
But if we do, there's not really too much question when the 50 years begins and ends, because we've just seen a lot of signs,
yeah.
so
I'd seen that article of yours. That's one that I have on my timeline where the Sanhedrin have started to count the
right,
Jubilee years, and
right.
that's a huge thing. There's so many
It is
things
huge. It's huge.
that's like another thing. I have like these kind of categories, like I have the altars and the foxes, but I also have all these times that you've written about and others where, oh, this is the first time in 2000 years that this has happened or that there's been a lot of first
There
time
have
in
been a lot.
2000 years that's been going on.
Yeah. You know what? I'm gonna have to be in touch with you when I'm putting together this new book because
Yeah.
you've got it. You've totally got it. But you're right. There's so many things, especially things having to do with the temple and the Temple Mount. Jews have been
Mhm.
around for 5,000 years, but there was a break for 2,000 years where a lot of things did not happen. And once again, and even for the temple, like they've rediscovered how to make the crimson wool.
Yeah.
What's in the Bible, it's called Pula'at Shani. They've rediscovered how to make the tchelet, the blue dye. All these things are being rediscovered that we haven't seen for 2,000 years, and they're back. So yeah, there's a lot of, it's funny when I first started writing 9 years ago. I've written almost 5,000 articles. Nine
Wow.
years ago, yeah, yeah. Oh, I can't believe it.
So
I'm
for you,
so
it's like I'm going to write a book. That's no big deal. I've already basically
I,
written
absolutely,
hundreds
which
of
is kind
books.
of, yeah, I'm taking the easy way out, but no, but I want to really go into depth in this because it's, an article you can only write this happened, but I feel very strongly about all this. I did not feel strongly about it when I started writing about it, but like said, once you see it, you can't unsee it. When I first started writing about this, I was like, come on, really, and now it's like, yeah. Yeah. Once you
Mhm.
see it, can't unsee it. And also, when I started writing 9 years ago, people thought I was crazy. And people were just like, oh, come on. This is always happening. You're making a big deal out of nothing. No one's saying that anymore. No one's saying that. Ever since COVID, people started realizing that we're living in a very special time. And like the war in Ukraine freaked a lot of people out. And the war in Israel is so clearly end of days, God's hand acting in the world that you got to go one way or the other. You got to be like, either like, wow, God is acting in the world and we know how God connects to the Jewish people and we want to be on that side. Or you
Mhm.
have people saying, oh, Israel is colonial and they're committing genocide, which is the biggest lie. And there's apartheid, which is the second biggest lie. And Israel has no connection to the land of Israel, which is the absolute biggest lie. You know, I mean, for this has been a major part of human history is that the Jews belong in Israel. Um, and people have to go out of their mind. They have to be insane in order to side against Israel. And they're willing to do that. They're willing to hurt themselves. Like the if you'll pardon the expression, gays for Gaza. They have to harm themselves. They have to destroy themselves in order to deny God and side against Israel. And I'm not saying because Israel's so amazing or we're the way to God or anything like that. What I'm saying is if God wants to know where your heart is, he'll stand a picture of the Jewish people in front of you and see how you react. Okay.
Yeah.
We're the
There,
litmus test.
there's just a lot of hysteria right now and a lot of division,
Yeah.
and it's at levels I don't think we've like really seen before.
No,
Not in
no.
my lifetime anyway. It's crazy, but yeah, it definitely he's definitely working with the world, I think with a lot of different people, in ways that they can understand. And yeah, I think we're
Yeah.
absolutely on the same page, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'm so pleased that I had this talk with you because not too many people do know about the Church of the Latter-day Saints. And there's a lot of fake news about the Church of the Latter-day
Oh yeah.
Saints, and I had a friend who opened me up to it. He said, they're like the only Christian sect that's never tried to kill the Jews. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting point. And you've actually, I think, showed me why that's the case and why we might be able to partner with you in a very sweet way.
Yeah.
Especially since you don't want to grab our Jerusalem and you want us to have our Jerusalem and you want to have your Jerusalem. And I'm like, okay,
Yep.
that sounds
Well,
good to me.
unlike other well, I can't speak for other Christians, but we
You're so
believe
sweet, man.
we believe that the Jews are still fully God's covenant people, and it's not like it's. I don't want to go into a whole thing, but like you're a very special people. That's our view, and it's not. Oh, you're going to hell. We believe that the Lord is working with you.
Really.
It's meant to be. Everything that's happening right now is meant to be. It's meant to be. So
Amen. Amen. Yeah, you really showed me a very important thing today. I appreciate it.
absolutely.
Um, because there are people who I have this I have a theory. The Vatican was built as a replacement for Solomon's temple. It was architecturally patterned after it. The
Oh, it
whole
was?
concept. Oh, sure. Oh,
I
sure.
didn't know that.
Instead of a T, it was made into a cross. They added a little thing on the end. The reason why the Pope and priests do not marry is because the high priest, in order to remain pure for the service on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, he's separated from his wife. So that's why they have that. And they have the incense, and it's very much patterned after the temple. So I have a theory that the two cannot coexist. We either have a temple in Jerusalem or we have the Vatican. But if you have the real thing in Jerusalem, why would you have a bad copy in Rome? I mean, that is replacement theology.
Hmm. Yeah.
And there are sects of especially Christianity and Islam, of course, that feel like the Jews should not be in the world and that our service is not the service to God, even though they do acknowledge that the Torah came from Mount Sinai and God. But the Jewish people, not so much. And that's what we're fighting against. And you're showing me something really nice, really nice.
Well, good. I'm
That
glad.
that warms my heart. Yeah, yeah. Seriously, 1,000%. That there's hope.
Well, we probably better end about here, but thank you so much for talking again and doing this update and talking about all these different really important things. Like I said, you guys, make sure to subscribe to Adam. He has a YouTube channel, and then if you're interested, buy the book. I'll put the link in the description box below. But if you want to learn about the Red Heifers, buy the book. Don't don't go to these YouTube channels or places that don't do research. They don't tie things down to reality. They don't get in contact with people that actually know. Go to authoritative sources if you want to know about it.
Here, I'm
But
sending you the link to my YouTube channel. It's called Wrestling the Angel for very
okay,
clear
perfect.
and obvious reason.
All right. Well, that's going to be it for this one. If you guys haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below, and then also make sure to share it, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Thank you so much, Jared. Be
Thank
blessed.
you.